Let's speak to Chris Garcia. He's the CEO of Vicar Financial and former Commerce Department official under President Trump. He's joining us from Washington, D.C. Thanks for speaking to us on Al Jazeera. So President Trump is saying that the U.S. is in a strong position, but we also know that China has now officially said it is going to stop buying U.S. agricultural products. So with farmers in the U.S. now losing one of their biggest customers, that is China. How does this all bode well for the Trump administration?
Right. So firstly, I'd like to state that it's the intention of this White House, it's the intention of this administration, certainly that of the United States, to reach an amicable deal with China. But that deal has to be a fair, free, and reciprocal deal. What we're seeing is China did not, in fact, come through with the promises that were negotiated. Back in May, we found that there were, I believe, 90 to 95% of those concessions that China had agreed to. And at the last minute, they pulled out. There was a 100-page document. And then China pulled out 50 of those pages, which were all of the structural changes that were requested by this administration. China then promises at the G20 summit that, in fact, we will not escalate tariffs on one another between the United States and China, and that China would go ahead and purchase large quantities of agricultural products. And they also promised, by the way, that they would not allow fentanyl to be exported to the United States. The problem is that China reneged on those as well. So they weren't going to buy agricultural products anyway. And so I think that right now we're trying to hold their feet to the fire, so to speak, to make sure that they actually do come through with those promises.
What do you make of this decision for the Trump administration to label China as a currency manipulator? Is it a justification to impose more tariffs in September, or is it a way for the president to try and extract more concessions? And will it work?
Well, the timeline was firstly that the president had said he was threatening after the trade delegation from the United States had gone to China and met with negotiators. It was Secretary Mnuchin and Bob Lighthizer, a U.S. trade representative. When they came back and briefed the president in the Oval Office, he was not pleased at all with the progress that had been made. In fact, what the report was is that China had not agreed to make those purchases, in fact. So the president wanted to ratchet up tariffs of 10% on $300 billion worth of Chinese goods. The designation as a currency manipulator was after the Chinese allowed their yuan to drop. And so that was another retaliatory action from the United States because they did in fact meet those three prerequisites to be labeled a currency manipulator. So now we'll see Secretary Mnuchin go to the IMF to try to work this out and find a solution. But this is a good indicator that the United States has all of these cards on the table, but we're in pursuit of fair, free, and reciprocal trade. That has got to be the end goal.
But the stock markets are feeling the repercussions as well. We've seen the stock markets really jittery over the past few days. So this is not really only about the United States and China, is it? It's about the global economy.
Of course. And I
so
would
what
say
is the risk to that?
The greater existential threat.
Yeah.
The greater existential threat is that we do not act, that we do not respond to China. This has been 20 years now in the making, if not more. Ever since we allowed them to enter the WTO, they've not played by the rules. They certainly have a fundamental different outlook on the world than the United States does, and I would say certainly our allies around the world. What I would say is that the rest of the world, the coalition of fair, free, and reciprocal traders should in fact find these actions by China to not be those that follow the rules. And we would rather have a fairer, freer, open trading system than to have a significant bad player that manipulates their currency, that imposes tariffs, that steals intellectual property, that forces joint technology transfers and joint ventures, and all around engages or sponsors in cyber espionage. That's something that the world cannot tolerate, and certainly we need to have the United States leading the way with our allies.
Chris Garcia, we thank you very much for speaking to us from Washington.
Thank you.